Yeah, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the, I think, 10th episode of the Nova Insights. This time, our guest will be Théo de Blic. I suppose that most of you know him quite well. Hello, Théo. How are you?
Hi, I'm fine, thank you. Just coming back from a heavy day of training, but otherwise all fine.
Yeah. So he has just taken a shower. Now he's fresh again. Yeah, just some technical things that you know. This is interactive. That means we want you to ask questions, but it means that you have to subscribe on YouTube, because otherwise you can't get into the chat. So ask questions, take the chance of talking directly to Théo. What you should also know is that this episode, like all the others, will be recorded. So in case you can't stay all the time, you can still watch the rest later on. You will find the link in the comments, so it's no problem. Of course, we would like you to stay. Yeah, that's the most important things. And I'll pass on to Théo. Where are you now? Where have you been recently?
So right now I'm in France, in my home in Chambéry. But last week I just came back from a 2-week trip with Nova, with the Nova team. I was in Socotra, an island of Yemen, where Nova did a movie 10 years ago. And I always dreamt of going to Socotra because it was like looking like an amazing island. So this year Nova made it happen, and we went there for the super secret shooting of the new Ion 7.
super secret, but revealing it's the Ion 7. Okay. Yeah. So just that everybody knows, at Dubai Cup we will officially release the Ion 7 and the Mentor 7, and also finally the X pack. It's the pack that you, Théo, have used already, and 2 years ago.
I still do use it.
Yeah, you still use it. Yeah, that's the ultralight backpack that you can use for stuff like the X Alps and border race and races like this. Okay, so today we talk about how to become a safe pilot. Théo, first you introduce yourself, so those who don't know you know who's talking, and then I pass the word on to you.
Perfect. So I prepared a small presentation, which will help me to follow my path to how to become a safe pilot. So first of all, for those who do not know me, my name is Théo de Blic. I'm 28. I'm mainly an acro pilot. I've been a professional pilot for 13 years, and since 2020, I'm also part of the Nova paragliding team. Of course, I'm mainly doing acro, but I'm also focusing on hike and fly, doing quite a lot of hike and fly with the Bantam, with the Xenon. And otherwise, the rest of the time, I'm training to compete in the Acro World Tour. So that's mainly the main thing about me. I'm also doing tutorials and mostly YouTube videos. So moving on to our subject, which is how to become a safe pilot, which is a tricky subject because everyone wants to be a safe pilot. But it's not that easy to be a safe pilot because it's kind of, it depends a lot on each and everyone's opinion. Everyone will find someone unsafe, and everyone will find himself very safe. So this is not that easy to be a safe pilot. First of all, I think we have to define a bit what is a safe pilot, because I think the definition will differ depending on who you are and what you are. If you are a really strict person, a safe pilot should be someone that never have any accident. My definition is a bit more flexible than that, because I consider that many pilots don't have accident, but it's not because they are safe, it's because they are very lucky. So I think a safe pilot is someone that understands what's going on and understand why things are happening to him or her, and is able to analyze and understand the risk is or she is putting himself into. I think that is the main thing about a safe pilot. Is it is a pilot who understands is in the environment, is flying, and is the conditions he is flying into. That is my opinion, but I don't know, maybe everyone has a different opinion, but I think, yes, this is mine so far. Till you have maybe a different one, I don't know.
Yeah, basically, I would agree. It's always what I mean. I'm flying since '86, so I think I'm. How old are you? When were you born?
94.
Okay, so I have more experience in paragliding than, or more years in paragliding than you have lived years. However, do you do in 1 or 2 years, you log more hours than I have logged in my whole time, because the first years my flights were only like 3 minutes, 5 minutes. But I could totally agree with you saying luck is definitely involved. It's 2 years ago I wrote an article for DHV magazine asking people who have never had an accident why they don't have it. I try to find out what they have in common. And to be honest, the final result was quite special, because everybody admitted a lot of luck was involved. Also for me, especially in the beginning, I had no clue of what I was doing. And I didn't even know that I had no clue, which is like ignorance and no knowledge is a very poisonous combination. And for me, certainly, a lot of luck was involved, I have to admit. But the more experience I get, the longer I fly, the more cautious I get. So,
Yeah, I think it is also the same for me, even as an acro pilot.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's I think many pilots don't understand that paragliding is blessed. So most of the time, crazy thing happened, and there is no incident related to those crazy things, and it kind of put many pilots to a fake sense of safety, which is can be quite damaging on the long run.
Yeah.
And that is why we are talking about this subject tonight. It is to kind of bring awareness to the important thing you need to do in order to be safer. It's impossible to limit all the risks within paragliding. It is part of what we are doing, but to understand them and to be able to plan them and to plan ahead is limiting a lot of the risks, and also making you a better pilot in the long run, because you understand what you have to do and how you have to do it in order to be safer. One of the first things that you have to consider, and it's quite natural, is the risk management. For me, the risk management is englobing a lot of subjects, and most of them are mental and preparation before the flight. And I have this video, which I snapped from TikTok a few months ago, which in my opinion includes zero risk management and a lot of optimism. So before I run it, it's a video of some guy, probably in South America, I think, which is trying to do a debug from a paramotor in a paragliding site, which looks perfectly suitable for flying. So I don't know why there is a paramotor there. It's a paramotor that seems to be for a solo paramotor pilot, and there are going to be 2 people on it with a debug. The guy has no idea how to launch with a debug. The pilot who is flying the debug is putting 100% trust in a pilot that he doesn't know, maybe. Anyway, I think everything is a red flag in this video, and you will see there was no injury, I checked, but it's kind of interesting how much risk people are willing to take for something which is pointless. And so here we go for some craziness and crash in the field. No injuries, which is incredibly lucky. I don't know when the pilot in this video thought it was a bad idea, probably when his head passed 2 centimeters from the propeller, or maybe when he saw that his pilot was completely twisted and going to crash, and he was going to crash next to a propeller. But anyway, everything screamed red flag and no go, but yet they went. And I think this is a good intro into risk management, in my opinion. So let's go into it. Risk management. The first thing I usually talk to when I talk about risk management, and I talk about it a lot in SIVs, is the notion of risk homeostasis, which is a well-known notion. I have the definition right here. The risk homeostasis is a theory that every person has an acceptable level of risk that they find tolerable. In other words, when you are starting an activity, you choose, like unconsciously, an amount of risk that you are willing to take. And whatever you are doing, so whatever level you are acquiring along your activity, along your experience, this level of risk is staying the same. So if you are getting a professional world champion in your field, you still have the same amount of risk, which will amount to more risk of being injured and less safety for yourself, because the danger, the risk you take have bigger consequences when you are very good than when you were a beginner. The thing is that it's the same amount anyway. So that is kind of an interesting notion. And I try to kind of pinpoint it because people usually mistake having great skills and getting better with taking less risks. And this is something that I try to highlight, particularly to SIV students, because I try to tell them, be careful. It's not because we've just done a week of SIV, you are feeling so much better, you are feeling more confident, still you are at the same level of risk. The consequences are just no different and you understand them differently, but you still have the same amount of risk you are willing to take. So this is, I think, something that needs to be considered by everyone in order to find out what amount of risk you are willing to take. If you have any remark about that, any questions?
Yeah, from my point of view, I totally agree with you, because I know that there are people who are in, let's say, not so pleasant situations every year or every other year, and they have to throw their reserves. And then there are other people who never have it. They just don't approach that. Yeah, they're just more careful.
On a personal situation, on a personal matter, I know the risk I'm willing to take when I'm flying, and I know that they are basically not changing year after year, and I accept them just because I know them and because I understand them. I'm trying to anticipate that I'm willing to take this amount of risk. And I think this is important. You can't change yourself, but you need to be aware of your flaws in order to anticipate them and to try to limit them as much as possible. Yep. So it brings me to my next point, which is know yourself and be aware of your skills and limitation. I think this is quite important to know yourself quite well when you are doing an activity like paragliding, because it's kind of insane to consider paragliding as riskless. We are doing this activity, there are risks involved within paragliding. Most of the risks related to paragliding come from yourself, and it's really important, I think, considering that all risks come from yourself, most of the risks, to be aware of your skills and limitation. And this is something I take quite seriously for myself, because as a world champion, I think I have quite a lot of skills, and I'm depending a lot on those skills when I do something. And this is really important to be aware that those skills won't save me in certain situations. So they imply also limitations. So I know that very low to the ground, I can be the best pilot in the world. Whatever happens to me is not going to be solvable. So, this is kind of something that I'm trying to put myself into, because a lot of skills imply a lot of self-confidence as well. And sometimes it's not that good to be so self-confident. So it's, I think, really important to be really aware of your skills and limitation, and to be able to really relate those skills to the amount of risk you are taking. Like, am I taking these risks, and am I able to cope with this risk? And if something happens, will my skills be enough to solve it? If the answer is no, then probably you are doing something wrong. If the answer is yes everywhere, then I think it's an acceptable amount of risk you're taking, in my opinion. And so this is also quite related to the next point, which is always fix your limit. Personally, I always try to fix my limits on a day-to-day basis. Basically, how am I feeling will fix my limit for the day. So what am I willing to do? What am I how am I willing to fly? Will I fly like really hardcore tricks today, or will I just train the basics, or will I just go for a cross country, or I can fly? Can I handle quite a sketchy takeoff, or is it better if I just fly in soft conditions? You know, I'm always trying to fix limits before I fly, because if you fix limits during the flight, I think it kind of flows the whole matter, because if you fix your limit while you are flying, you are always in the enjoyment of the flight. You are always feeling the flight, and it's kind of faking the feeling of safety, because you're like, I want to do more, I want to do more, I want to do more, because you know you are within your flight. You don't want to hand it. You don't want to do something that could stop your flight. While if you fix your limit beforehand and you stick by them, you are sure to never do something stupid. And I think this is quite important. And it's something that I saw many times in I Can Fly pilots just saying the conditions were too much. Before I took off, I decided that if this happened, I would go to land. And I think this is a safe approach, in my opinion, in order to fly safe. And another thing, which is with fixing your limit, is to know yourself well enough to know that which situation kind of make you being a bit of a hothead. And for example, for myself, I know that flying in a group does not push me to do something crazy, but guilt push me to do something crazy. So in other words, when I think that I haven't trained enough in the last days, or when I'm making a mistake on the forecast and I'm handing up on the wrong spot and everyone is training a lot in another spot, I kind of feel guilty, and I'm willing to take a lot more risk on the next day or on that day in order to cope with this lost training. And that's how I end up injured most of the time, is when I feel guilty. And group flying does not push me to take risks, but for some people, group flying push them to take risks. So it's important to know this about yourself and to fix your limits, saying, no, right now, it's not my self-thinking, it's my ego, it's my guilt in my part that is pushing me. So this is quite important, I think.
Yeah, that's something I completely agree with you, especially flying in a group. Some people have a different limit, and I really admire everybody who says, to me, it doesn't seem to be okay, I'm not flying. And I think this is actually an attitude of strength and of having a clear mind to say that, and not being a wimp. We should admire people who say, no, it's not for me.
Yeah, I think it's really important. We are doing a sport where anyway, we have risks involved, and it's really hard to be the best in the world. And no one is the best in the world every day. So you have to accept that some days is just not your day, or you don't feel it. And there is no point if in showing your skills or your level, or showing off and showing your ego to other people, because it's your own life. You know, when you're doing it like doing table tennis, you don't take the same risk. So you can show off doing table tennis, but when you are showing off with a paraglider at 1,000 meters above the ground, I think the amount of risk is a bit too much, in my opinion. So another point which is really important, I really briefly talked about, is be aware of your day-to-day mental state, because as I said, we are not feeling the same every day. Some days you are feeling great, some days you're not feeling so good. It's quite important to listen to yourself, because on a day you feel really tired, your reaction time is not going to be the same. And on a day you are feeling really great, you are also maybe more susceptible to take more risks, because you are feeling great. So you think that you are going to be able to cope with more risks. So it's quite important in your risk management to answer the question, how am I feeling today? And what is my mental state going to do to my risk management? I think this is quite important. Another thing about risk management, and
may I just ask you something, Theo?
Yeah.
Does it happen to you that you think of going to fly, or actually you are at the launch site, and you have kind of a strange guts feeling, and you think something's wrong? or maybe something is not okay, but you cannot really say what it is. Do you know that? I have it sometimes, and then I just say, okay, for some reason, if somebody asks me, why don't you fly? My answer would be, I have a strange feeling, but I cannot really define it. Do you have the same?
It happens to me, and I used to not listen to it at all. And then I had an accident in Turkey in 2020, which was because I had a gut feeling that it was not feeling right, and I went anyway, and I ended up crashing in the rocks. And since then, I'm listening to it a lot more because I think it's, every time I had this gut feeling, it really saved me. Like this summer in Organia, everyone flew in a storm and I landed because I had this gut feeling that was like, I think something wrong is going to happen. And 20 minutes later, 5 people crashed because the storm came like quite fast. So I'm quite aware of this gut feeling and try to listen to it as much as I can. But every time I get it, I'm trying to pinpoint why I have it and if it makes sense, because sometimes, I mean, if you fly a lot, like I do, sometimes you can also get bored or tired of flying. And this is kind of the same feeling, so you need to, I always need to be aware of which one I'm feeling. But if I pinpoint it as don't do it, as this don't do it gut feeling, then I usually stop right there and go do something else. So another point which is important in your risk management, and it's not only mentally related, but also flying related, I think, is that for most pilots, we don't really look much further than the flying spot we are at, and that how is the wind at the landing, how is the wind at takeoff, and we don't really look much deeper than that. And I think it's quite important to be aware of your surroundings, particularly at landing. So it's quite important when you are gonna land somewhere to be aware of all the danger there is at the landing. So the valley wind, the possible lee side, so a tree, a cliff, a house, some rocks somewhere, to be aware of all those possible areas, to really check them beforehand. Indeed, according to the French Federation, 40% of the accidents paragliding related happen during landing, and for most of them, they are related to pilots underestimating lee side, underestimating an obstacle like a tree or a wall or something that they just didn't see beforehand. So in your risk management, I think it's quite important to pay attention to the small details of the flying site we are surrounded by, because most of the time we don't see them. We just miss the wall, miss the power line, miss this or that, and then you are surprised when you land. And I'm sure it happened many times to any of you that you landed and you just saw that after landing, you just saw that you had a power line close by that you hadn't seen before. You passed far away from that power line, but what if, and it's quite important to check the place you're flying at quite extensively, particularly if it's a place that you don't really know, I think. And last but not least, which is quite related in the risk management, is you have to beware of being in a routine, because for some of us, and me included, we fly in the same spot on and on and on and on and on again. And we feel really comfortable in that spot because we know everything about it. And we end up being in a complete routine, which means that we don't even check anymore the wind there. We don't even check if anything changed. And that's how we can actually, I think, feel a bit too safe in the place we are flying at, because if something is different, we are not going to be noticing it, basically because we just are too focused, to blind to the new things that are happening to our routine. And it's really important to beware of being in a routine for your flying spot, for your flying analysis, forecast, or weather-wise, and for your flying equipment, particularly for the rescue, which is really easy to be in a routine with. Basically, you never see it, you never check it, because it's always right? The pins are always on until they are not. So it's quite important to beware of being in a routine, I think. Any questions about that?
No, there's nothing in the chat yet.
Perfect. So the next part is more flying related and is, I think, a bit more interesting flying wise, is the notion of ground handling. Ground handling, in terms of safety, is a key aspect of safety. So I just have a small video of me doing spins on a takeoff in France, basically just playing in the wind before flying. So it's just like some easy play on launch, and I think it's quite important to understand that ground handling is often considered not a big part of flying, but is in fact a huge part of flying and an underestimated part of flying. So, first of all, one key aspect of ground handling is that almost a third of the accidents are takeoff related and are directly related to a lack of ground handling experience. And I think this is quite incredible considering how easy it is to train ground handling. I mean, it does not involve incredible flying condition. It does not involve 3,000 plus cloud base. Basically, most days are ground handling available days. And I think this is really important to understand that ground handling is a key aspect of flying. And the first thing you have to do with ground handling is to practice. It's super, super important to practice ground handling on and on and on and on and on again, because that's how you get better. And this is one of the things that you can practice hours and hours and hours and hours without any problems, and you will still have a lot of things to learn. And one mistake that most people do when they practice ground handling is that they are just gonna simply inflate, check the glider, watch the glider for 2 minutes, keep it above the head, put it down, and do this for 35, 40 minutes, and then they feel good about themselves. Good, I did my ground handling exercises for the next months, and then they go home. But there is a lot more to do about ground handling. I made tutorials about that, but you have a lot of exercises that actually make you better and make you more aware of your glider behavior and make you safer on a takeoff, because on a takeoff, you are not just inflating, checking your glider and running. Sometimes you are inflating and the glider is going sideways. Sometimes the wind is different. Sometimes the glider is inflating in a different way. Sometimes the glider is shooting quite hard. You know, you have a lot of different scenarios and you have ways to train for all those scenarios to feel comfortable. So if you practice ground handling, I think it's quite important to practice not only just raising the glider, dropping the glider, raising the glider, dropping the glider. It's, in my opinion, really, really important. And so related to that is that every takeoff is a ground handling opportunity. Most pilots, they arrive to a takeoff, they fly away. And I think it's a bit of a shame because many takeoffs, not all of the takeoffs, but many takeoffs are ground handling friendly, which means that even if they are not big, you can still inflate, play a bit with the wing, even if you can't really move more than 2 meters. You can feel the air, enjoy your wing for a bit, and then fly away. But you always have 10 minutes available to ground handling. First of all, it gives you a great idea about the conditions you are in. It improves your skills, and it also warms you up a little bit before your flight. So I think it's important to take every takeoff as a ground handling opportunity. It's something that I always do. I almost never arrive to a launch where I will just inflate and go. If there is like 5K, 10K wind, I will always inflate, play a bit, and then go. I will never just come and go like that. I will always take the opportunity to ground handle. And if there is no wind, then I will, of course, take off and go. But I will use all the opportunities I get to improve my skills. And I think this is quite important, and not many pilots are actually taking ground handling as a playful thing and not as a duty. So I think it's quite important. All right. So as I said during the practice, it's important to diversify your training. You have a lot of tutorial on internet, like a lot about ground handling. You have the throw and go, the spins. Like I made some of them, but a lot of other people which are really talented made a lot of them as well. So if you want ideas on how to diversify your training, go to those tutorials. But anyway, I think it would help you as a pilot, because one thing about ground handling is that good ground handling skills equal flying skills, which means that if you see a pilot which is an expert at ground handling, they are usually very good at flying, which means that they feel their wing quite precisely, and they are really able to control their wing really nicely. And I never saw a great ground handling pilot being a bad pilot. And this is like kind of a rule. And usually in acro flying, the best pilots out there are amazing at ground handling. In cross-country flying, it's also kind of related. And in hike and fly, it's a really important part, because if you are on the X-Alp, you need to be very good at ground handling, because most of the takeoff we are at are terrible. So yeah, this is quite important. If you're great at ground handling, you're great at flying. So it should motivate you to focus on that. Any remark about the ground handling part?
Yeah, Ines just posted me. By the way, Ines is from the Nova marketing team, and she's the one in the background who coordinates Zoom, because Theo and me, we are on Zoom, and then from there it's streamed to YouTube. So Ines is coordinating everything, and she reads the chat, and she puts your questions into our special chat. So she said there are some questions, but we will answer them in the end, because they're more general. That's what she said.
All right.
So, those who have asked questions and are wondering why is Till saying there are no questions? No, there are questions, and Ines is taking care for it. So she's filtering it and putting it into groups, and so yeah. And there's one question. Matthias, good evening. Does it make sense to use some more agile glider for ground handling, like an acro wing, even as a beginner?
In a way, yes, and in a way, no. An acro wing, for example, is a terrible ground handling wing, because you need a lot of wind to have fun with an acro wing. It's not a fun wing to ground handle. But if you're able to ground handle an acro wing expertly, very well, then you are gonna be very good at ground handling a normal wing. So, and it's not risky to ground handle an acro wing. So you can train with an acro wing, but it's gonna be a difficult process if you're a beginner. I would suggest to first start with your wing to train all the basic exercises, and then if you want, you can move on to an acro wing to ground handle, and it will improve your skills for sure. But I would still suggest to first work on your own glider, because that's a glider you are using every day, and it's also gonna be much easier than an acro wing. All right.
Yep.
So the next part about being a safe pilot is the glider control. About glider control, basically what I consider being glider control would be all the technical skills. So how you are gonna fly your glider, or you're gonna handle turbulences, etc., etc., etc. So I put a video of us, which was actually shot 1 week ago in Socotra in Yemen, of Fabian Geistiger, the Nova test pilot, flying a front collapse with the new Ion 7. All right, so this is just a small video about glider control, which brings us to the important part of how to be safe through glider control. First of all, and again, this is from the French Federation, because I have access to those numbers, so it's easy for me to use them. But almost all of the flying incidents come from wrong behavior from the pilot during collapses. So most of the flying incidents are coming from pilots who are badly handling a collapse. And this is something that I see a lot, and most of the time nothing happens. Like I have a lot of pilots arriving on landing and saying, "Wow, I took a huge collapse and I did this and that and that." And when they tell me all they did, it's all the wrong reactions. But fortunately for them, their wing is very safe and it opened despite their wrong reactions. And usually they think that they reacted the right way, while in the end it was a terrible way to react. Still, just their wing and the wing we are flying now are super safe. So this is one thing that you need to consider, is that I think for every pilot, an SIV is really, really important. I'm not saying that because I own an SIV school. I'm saying that because I really believe in the SIV system, which is that every pilot should at least do an SIV, maybe not every year, but every time it changes glider at the minimum. And if you do it every year, it's even better. But because during an SIV, you are gonna be able to practice and to simulate all the flying incidents we might encounter during your flying career. So first of all, it's gonna show you what might happen. It's gonna kind of build up your muscle memory about how to react when something wrong happens. It's gonna show you when you have to do nothing, because sometimes you have to do nothing, and if you do something, it's worse than if you did nothing. And it's gonna show you what to do when you have to do something. So I think flying an SIV is super important for every pilot. And again, I know that SIVs have some costs, so does medical bills. So I think the medical bills are way cheaper than SIVs in the end. So I think an SIV is worth all the cost you can give them to. And we have a lot in Europe. We are really, really lucky. We have a lot of SIV school, a lot of great places to practice. It's not the case everywhere in the world. So I think it would be a shame not to use them. So again, I cannot say it enough. SIVs are a must if you want to fly safer. Another thing that is rarely considered, because the better you get as a pilot, and the more you want to fly long and to fly long hours and to fly long XA flights, or to fly on your own side for 3 hours thermaling, and the less you want to go at 8 a.m. for a morning flight. But I think that it's really important to still do morning flights, because the morning flights are perfect to work on your technical skills, to work on small exercises which are not necessarily dangerous, but which are gonna teach you how to handle your wing. Because it's all well and well, but no one expects you to know how to handle your wing by practicing straight into rough conditions. I mean, if you say it that way, it's kind of stupid to think that you're gonna learn how to handle the pitch and the roll of your wing by jumping into a fully activated spring day with thermals everywhere. It's much safer to first work on those skills on a morning flight at 8 a.m. or during the winter time, to try to practice pitch, to try to practice rolls, to try to practice small wing overs or some dynamic turns, in order to be able to really control your wing, to know how to anticipate its movement, and basically to get familiar with all those movements that you're gonna find during a thermaling day. So I think this is really, really important, and that not many people, or not enough people, consider the morning flights or the winter flights as an opportunity to practice, rather than just stay close to the mountain and try to delay the landing for as long as possible. I mean, this is something that I always urge people to do, in a way. And then I'm gonna preach my own church, in a way, because I'm gonna say that acro flying, freestyle flying is really important to fly safe, is a really good way to be a safer pilot, and it's a really good way to learn glider control. In a way, acro flying and freestyle flying teach you, and we are working on all the axes that you encounter during a normal flight, a thermaling flight. We play on the pitch, on the roll, and on the yaw movement. This is the basic of our tricks. And this teaches us a lot of the basic movements that we are gonna encounter during a thermaling flight. And it also teaches us a lot about the flying incidents. So an acro pilot is very good at handling a collapse, is very good at handling cravats, is very good at handling strong pitch, etc., etc., etc. And so acro and freestyle flying are teaching you those kind of skills. You don't have to be an expert acro pilot, but touching those parts of flying, I think, could help you a lot. And a way that acro and freestyle pilots have a very big edge to normal pilots is on the rescue handling, because yes, in the glider control, there is the notion of rescue. So I did a talk about rescue on the Nova Insights 2 years ago, I think. But I will say it again here, the rescue is a very important part of our flying equipment. And acro pilots, freestyle pilots, always think about their rescue. It's always in their mind that they are maybe gonna use their rescue. They know how to use it. They know how to take care of it. They know what to do if they need to use it. And this is really important skills that you learn when you are flying acro. And it's really important. It's a really important mindset that you learn also when you're flying acro. It's a mindset that you might need to use your rescue during your flight. And if you are prepared to use your rescue in your flight, you are flying so much safer, because most accidents happen because the pilots forget that they had a rescue. They forgot that this was still a possibility, and they forgot to use their rescue, and then they end up crashing. And so I think as a pilot, it's really important to remember before every flight that the rescue is a possibility. And that's what I say during my rescue presentation. And I say it on and on and on and on again. If you are a paragliding pilot, you need to know everything there is to know about your rescue, and you need to know how to use it. And you need to think that you're going to use it one day, because if you think that it's never going to happen to you, the day you might need it, you will never use it. So this is quite important.
Yeah, I think this mental, I don't know the English word, that you actually like
visualization.
Pardon?
Visualization. I think.
Yeah, the visualization, exactly. Yeah, that you might have to use it, and that it's not something that will not happen to you. You have to be prepared to throw it. And there's one good saying is you're never too low to throw the reserve. And even if it just makes your crash a little bit slower, you're never too low to throw the reserve. I think
it's never too low. Personally, I've thrown my reserve in many moments where I thought, okay, I'm way too low. I throw it anyway because I have to throw it, but it's never gonna happen. And every time it opened, and every time I had a few seconds to spare before I landed. So it's never too late. You can always open. I don't have it here, but there is a video that circulated on social media with a guy getting a stall at like maybe 15 meters and throwing his reserve, and the reserve open and he lands. I mean, it's never too low.
Yeah. There's one question from Ralph. He's asking concerning the morning flights. Are there specific exercises that you would suggest for a morning flight practice?
Yeah, I think it's really important to practice the pitch. So it's also called dolphins for English speaker. Basically, when you're just like pitching the glider on and on and on, and training to keep a steady pitch, flying straight, so not a pitch that rotates, and to handle the shoot of the pitch. And rolls are also really, really important. So practice rolls with the only weight shift, with weight shift and B gears. Those are really safe. And if you are feeling more confident, small wing overs, connecting pitch with some turns as well, so dynamic turns, and all those exercises, they are really, really important.
I think it's these exercises depend on what your level in ground handling and piloting is in general. So
yeah, exactly.
It depends, I would say.
It depends on your level, but pitch and rolls are really open to very beginners. Wing overs, if you are feeling more confident, you need a bit more skills, but pitch and rolls actually bring you to wing overs. But don't take it as a one morning flight, I'm gonna do this, and then I'm gonna move on to wing overs, and then I'm gonna move on. It's a process, so you have to do it more and more and more until you feel confident. And when you feel confident, then you can move on to something different. And sometimes it's really rare that we fly alone. So there is always a more experienced pilot around you that can tell you of your mistakes, or that can tell you when it's very good. So to also put things into perspective, because we always feel things differently from the inside than from the outside. So it's quite important also to take feedback from what you are doing in order to know that, was it looking good? And usually if it's looking good, then it means that you are doing it right. This is about paragliding, and technical flying is about making things look good.
Yeah, now we get more questions. One is, we had an accident in Pokhara on a CCC wing, collapse and spin. What is the ratio of possible turbulence to wind speed ratio? Do you understand exactly what he means? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I understand what he means, but it's a really different, it doesn't really matter. For example, you could be on a dune, on a seaside spot, and it could be 40 km per hour wind, and it's not going to be turbulent. It really depends on each spot. And that's when I talk about know your surroundings, it means that each spot has an amount of wind and a direction of wind which is really turbulent and really nasty, and that you have to be aware of. For example, where I live, with more than 20 km per hour of north wind is very good. And one valley next to me in Saint-Hilaire with 20 km of north wind is really turbulent and really nasty. So it's quite important to know the specificities of each spot, because sometimes 20 km of wind can be terrible to fly, and sometimes it's very good and it's really needed in order to fly. So there is no relation between the wind speed and the turbulences, because it depends on the spot. Basically, if you have 60 km of wind, it's going to be turbulent anyway, probably. But yeah, for most of the wind speed, it's more the location that decides if it's turbulent or not.
Yeah. One question is, that's a good one, from Tees, kiting versus SIV. Which is more valuable in terms of skills and reaction development, doing like 300 hours of kiting and ground handling, or doing one SIV?
I would go for the kiting, I think, and ground handling, because those 300 hours, if you are willing to do 300 hours of ground handling and kiting, you are gonna get incredible skills. And in the end, one SIV is gonna be very useful. But those hours you're gonna do ground handling and kiting are gonna give you a feeling under your wing that you can't learn anywhere else. So I would go for kiting and ground handling over SIVs. But since ground handling and kiting is free, I would say that both are easily manageable, because you can ground handle for free anywhere and pay your SIV once a year without problem.
Yeah, I think it's good to do both.
Yeah.
Also, like it's a different thing whether you are on the ground or whether you are in the air. Like you may be dragged away by the wind, but you will not fall down from high altitude when you do ground.
Yeah, but I mean, when you are very good at ground handling, you get a feeling, and you get a feeling of your wing, which is really easy to translate into the air. And usually people that are really good at ground handling, they have the right reactions when something wrong happens. So when they get a collapse in the air, the people that are really good at ground handling usually have the right reaction, because they have the instinct from ground handling about what to do and how to do it, and not to overdo it, because they are quite precise in their reactions. But yes, if you can, I mean, I would really highly advise to do both, really a lot of kiting and SIVs. But if we have to balance them, kiting is more important than an SIV. And again, I don't have a kiting school, so if I say it, it's because I believe in it.
One question concerning the rescue. Do you recommend carrying two of them, left and or right hand? And if you have space for two reserves, do you recommend one being a Rogallo style of
So I talk about it a bit in the next part, but I don't think carrying two rescues is a must when you are flying, basically because normal pilots don't use that many rescues in their flying career. Most pilots never use it. Some pilots use it only once. I think if you are normal flying, only one rescue is enough. But as soon as you're interested into freestyle or acro flying, to rescue is really important, because you never know, you can end up in situations where you might need both rescues. And if you are flying competitively, also two rescues is not a bad thing, particularly in cross country, because most pilots will never use both rescues. But anyway, most pilots in cross country are trying to be as heavy as possible. So instead of taking 5 liters of water, having an extra rescue, which just makes you a bit safer, is not a terrible thing, in my opinion. But concerning the Rogallo, I'm a big fan of the Rogallos. I think it's an amazing tool, and it's the most amazing rescue that we have right now, because it opens really nicely, it handles quite nicely, it glides, and it's really offers a soft landing compared to a normal rescue, which is the sink rate is divided by 2 on a Rogallo compared to a normal rescue. So I think it's an amazing reserve to have over a normal reserve. Just the downside is the packing, which is a bit annoying, and the fact that you need to know how to use a Rogallo. It's not complicated, but you need to be aware how to use it when you install it. Just do not put it in your harness and never think about it again. Then you lose most of the interest of the Rogallo. You need to buy it, and then you kind of document yourself on how to use it in order to make sure that you have the best use of your Rogallo possible.
Okay. And then there's a couple of questions concerning SIVs, which are very similar, these questions. How long after I have learned paragliding should I wait until I do an SIV, or how many flights, or how many hours, or what are the minimum skills before I do an SIV?
So it depends a lot on your goals and your flying goals, but I would say that as soon as you are considering doing thermal flying and flying for hours in different conditions of thermaling condition and possible turbulent conditions, you should consider going into an SIV. For example, for myself, we welcome every pilot as soon as they're able to land and take off by themselves. So if you are autonomous on landing and takeoff, most SIV schools will be more than happy to take you on. Basically, because during an SIV, we don't check you at landing, we don't check you at takeoff, we check you in the air. And so most of the time we are focused on the pilot in the air, not on the pilot landing. So we need the pilot to be autonomous at landing. But we are more than happy to welcome any type of pilot. I've had pilot with only 30 flights sometimes, and it always goes very well. And I think it's a very good start in your progression if you are going a SIV as soon as you are considering thermal flying.
Yeah, I think it's never too early.
Yeah, I mean, if you are not able to take off and land by yourself, then of course an SIV is not possible for you. But as soon as you are autonomous on those aspects, you can come, and it's never gonna be a lost time, because SIVs are flexible. We can learn different things, but most of the things we learn are open for beginners.
Yeah, an interesting question comes from Joost. How can I prepare myself for an SIV, both mentally and technical training? He says, last time I had a lot of problems with exiting a spiral dive. Now this makes me afraid, and I don't know the specific training exercises. So
basically, if you come to an SIV, the fastest progression I noticed with my students are the students who are quite comfortable with doing pitch and rolls and small wingovers on their own before they come. So the students which are comfortable with those small exercises are usually doing a bit better than the other students during an SIV. So I would suggest pilots to come prepared by being quite comfortable with pitch, rolls, etc., because this helps. Concerning the mental preparation, I think and I believe that it's important when you go to an SIV to understand that you are going to be with someone that is going to do his best to help you. So you have to come prepared to put your ego on the side and listen to what the person have to say, because many pilots come and they just don't listen. They just are not open to to getting advice. They just think that they're gonna come, we're gonna tell them what to do, and if something goes wrong, it's not their fault. So it's important to come and be open to remarks and to having your pilot skills challenged.
Yeah.
Concerning the spiral, sorry.
Yeah, so sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you.
So concerning the spiral, there is no, I mean, I would not recommend exercises to work on the spiral by yourself, because I think the spiral is one of the most dangerous trick and most dangerous exercises that we have on. And I think it's important to not train it by yourself if you're not comfortable particularly, and to just come into an SIV where you will take the time you need in order to work on the spiral. I, for example, do not put a number of flights I'm working on the spiral. I always work on the spiral with my student until it is mastered and comfortable. And I think it's important to not work on it by yourself if you're not comfortable, because that is the most dangerous flying exercise that there is right now for paragliding pilots.
Yeah, I think that one thing that Joost is writing is actually a major step to improve. He says, this makes me afraid. Like many people don't dare to say, oh, I'm afraid, I'm scared. If you can admit this and talk to the SIV trainer, that will definitely help you a lot. Just the attitude, I think.
And it's quite important to tell those things, because it also helps your SIV trainer to adapt his training. Because if you have someone who is not afraid at all, you are not going to teach the same way as with someone who is actually afraid. So it's quite important to be honest about those things, because I know that if I have someone who is quite afraid of spiral, my approach is going to be a bit smoother, and I'm going to go a bit more step by step than with someone I feel is really confident. So then with this person, I know that if I go step by step, he's not just going to be bored. So I need to speed it up a little bit in order for him to stay interested, you know. So it's important to be honest about those things and to really tell to your SIV trainer that you're afraid, that you are stressed about this, because we have ways to adapt and we have ways to teach differently. And whoever the trainer is, most of the time, that's what they will do. They are not going to teach the same way to every student that come into the hand.
One question I would like to ask you from myself. In our club, we were last fall, we did a G-force training, which I found really interesting in terms of finding out how my body reacts to defined G-forces like 4G, 5G, 6G, and breathing techniques. Of course, it's nothing. It's not a real spiral, but I found it interesting just to see what I can cope with. Is that also helpful from your point of view?
What I like, so first of all, I don't think in paragliding, we don't experience the G-forces like in a G-force training. For example, we are not going to stay forever in a G-force to test ourselves. But what happens for most pilots is that they are very surprised by the G-force when something happens, like an auto rotation or a spiral. And I think the G-force training is really useful in order to be aware of this situation, to be aware of this feeling, so that you are not surprised. Because if this happens in the air, being surprised will make you lose several seconds, maybe even minutes, where you could have done something else, including throwing your reserve. And so I think that doing a G-force training beforehand kind of get you acquainted with the feeling, and maybe might delete the feeling of surprise if an incident happens. That being said, G-force training are really not available to everyone, because they are really Europe-centered and even really some spot-centered. So they are not really available. So I don't talk about it so much, because I know that really few people have the opportunity to do a G-force training. But if you do, it's a really interesting thing, first of all, as a pilot, and it might make you save some seconds in case something happens one day.
Yeah. One question is from Natalie, and then we should move on to the next topic, I think. In terms of confidence, do you have some advice? I think she means how can you get more confident?
I mean, it's different for everyone. For myself, I do a lot of self-analyzing. So basically, I try to separate when I'm scared, when I'm afraid, and when I'm stressed. It helps a lot my confidence. So basically, I try to when I'm feeling scared, when I'm feeling stressed about something, I'm trying to separate. So am I feeling scared or am I feeling stressed? And the difference is if I'm feeling that I don't know what's gonna happen, so I'm gonna do a flight, for example, and try a trick, and then I'm not 100% sure of the consequences of this trick. I'm not 100% sure of what's gonna happen if I fail this trick. It means that I'm scared, and if I'm stressed, it means that I know what's gonna happen if I fail this trick. I know how to react if I fail this trick, but I just don't want to fail it, you know? I'm stressed about failing it. I don't want it to happen, but if it happens, I know what to do. And if I'm scared, it means that I'm not prepared enough. So if I feel scared or afraid, it means that I did something wrong beforehand, that I'm not ready to fly that trick yet, or to train this, or to fly in these conditions. And if I'm just stressed, I am ready to do it. It's just that I don't want to mess it up. And I think in terms of confidence, it's important to analyze a lot the situation you are in, to kind of put things into perspective, and and to be sure that you are feeling afraid or stressed because of things that are easily analyzed, you know, like, okay, I'm feeling scared, which means that something is not right. I'm feeling stressed, it's all right. I have the right to feel stressed because I don't want to fail, or I don't want this to happen to me. But if this happens, I am ready. So I think to boost your confidence, it's important to look back at your skills to see that you are able to handle what's going to happen to you. And this will boost your confidence, because you know that if it happens, you don't want it to happen, but if it happens, you are ready. And if you are not ready to cope with the consequences, it means that you have some work to do on a different topic. And again, for the confidence, I think the rescue is a big thing. If you are able to really think through your rescue and say, okay, if something happens, I know how to use my rescue, it could also be a confidence boost, in my opinion.
Yep.
All right.
Next topic.
So next topic is flying gears. Flying gears, sorry, not gears. So flying gears, so basically your flying equipment, because many pilots are not flying the right equipment. And it's kind of, I think it's getting worse with time. Within paragliding, it's something I noticed, that most pilots, they are not flying the right gear for their level, which is, I think, a shame, because at the moment we have the safest and most complete flying equipment we have ever had. We have all the wings for all the levels. We have all the harness for all the kind of different discipline of paragliding, and still many pilots are just flying the wrong wing, or the wrong harness, or the wrong rescue, or anything. So it's, I think, something really related to your ego and to pride more than anything else, which means that right now in paragliding, everyone has kind of a plan, you know. You start flying with your A wing, you lock in this amount of flight, you move to a B, you lock in this amount of flight, you move to a C, and you lock in this amount of flight, you move to a D, and then to a CCC. And even worse, you fly for 1 year, you have a A, you fly for 2 years, you have a B, and 3 years, it's a C, 4 years, it's a D, and 5 years, it's a CCC. So I think it's a stupid way of seeing things. And it's just your ego talking, like thinking, okay, if I reach 5 years of flying, I should be flying a D, because if I'm not, I'm a bad pilot. And I think it's quite stupid. So I think you should really relate to your skills, thinking, I'm choosing my wing because I know that I can handle this amount of collapses, this kind of behavior, and not because I'm flying since 2 years. And I think it's something that we see a lot, particularly with the new ENDs, with many pilots flying the new ENDs, the new two-liners, because they think that it's way safer than a CCC, and they have been flying for 5 years, and before they had a really safe C, so why not move to a new D, because they're gonna anyway be able to handle it, while in the reality, they are not able to handle a D wing, and on the time that something wrong happened, usually it ends up with terrible consequences. So I think this is really important. And I think that related to that, it's quite important to always consider going to a lower class sometimes, because it's not always a step down to go to a lower class, particularly considering the performances of the B range nowadays. Like a Motor 7 has a really two-liner feeling when you are flying it. The speed is really nice. The glide and the performances are really nice. You are able to do amazing XA flight with a Motor 7. And it's a B wing, and it's a really safe wing. So I think it's important for pilots to always consider going to a lower class, particularly if for the last 2 years they have not been able to really fly. They want to change their wing because they think that next year they're gonna fly a bit more, but for the last 2 years they were not flying. I think it's important to consider going to a lower class, or at least to stay in the same class in order to fly safe. And it's most pilots will just consider this as a step down. Well, in my opinion, it's not a step down. It's just a continuity in your flying journey, and it's quite important to consider this, I think.
Yeah, may I add something from my own experience? Like in the early days, everybody was flying the latest and the hottest wings, because that was the matter of maybe staying in the air for 10 minutes or 15 minutes, or just staying airborne or landing. So the first years, yeah, I mean, I'm really glad that I survived it. And then I progressed and progressed, and then at that time it was flying DHV 2 or 2 to 3 or DHV 3. Then we started to have these categories, and I had the idea, like so many others, if I have a higher class wing, I'm going to fly better. But then I realized that I got attracted to cross-country flying, and I realized that I bombed out all the time after 3, 4, 5 hours. And then I got the chance to fly, I think it was like with the Mambu on the first Mentor, that I flew them, and I realized with my limited skills, I mean, there are people who can fly a CCC wing for 12 hours, but I realized I'm not able to do this. And I realized that if I fly a lower category wing, I actually going to do longer flights, log more kilometers than with a higher category wing. And besides, I was feeling more relaxed. I had more fun. I don't have any ambitions to fly a high category wing. I'm so happy with my B wing.
Yeah,
a lot of experienced pilots come to that point, and especially flying cross country. I mean, one thing is, if you're not relaxed, you will bomb out sooner or later, because the wing takes so much of your ability to concentrate and to focus that you will make a wrong decision and then you bomb out.
I think for most regular pilots, during cross country, your decision making and analysis and where you're gonna fly to is way more important performance-wise than the real performance of your wing. And having a wing that allows you to think and dedicate time to make decision rather than focus on your handling is probably helping you to fly further. But I understand that everyone wants the best gliding wing. It's normal, but it's not, I think, 100% of the performance that you're gonna get. I think your mental analysis and decision-making is a bigger part than your wing in that moment. If you are chasing record, it's a different matter, but if you are chasing pleasure and XA flight for yourself, I think this is something to consider. Another point about the equipment is don't let yourself be influenced by others when choosing your gears. Try to choose your gear with your own feeling and with your own liking, because most pilots, they will just get themselves influenced, and even worse, many pilots will get influenced because everyone will always tell them, oh, but you should fly a C-wing. Anyway, you have the level for a C-wing. But those pilots usually don't know you. They just hear you talking. They just hear your paragliding stories, and from there, they pass a judgment. You should fly a C-wing. You should fly a D-wing. and they don't know you. They don't have the skills to judge your flying skills as well. They are not paragliding instructors. They are not professionals. So don't put yourself at risk by getting yourself influenced by others' opinion. Your opinion, I think, is important. And if you want a real opinion, go check with a professional and instructor that will assess your flying skills and tell you exactly what you should fly. But don't let random pilots judge your flying skills and influence you in your choices of equipment. Because we paraglider pilots love to judge other people's skills, and usually it's really bad judgment. Another thing about equipment, and we talked about it just before because of the questions, is choose the right rescues. Most pilots, they buy the rescues and they never think about it for the next 10 years, and then they buy another one because the first one was too old, but they never thought about it. They just repacked it every year or made it repacked by someone, but they never really checked what the rescue is, what's the brand, what's the weight or anything. They just, buy it, put it in the harness, forget about it. And it's quite important to choose the right rescues. In my opinion, Rogallos are the best rescue you can buy. I personally used my Beamer 3 for my adventure every year, and every year it saved my life, and every year it was amazing. And every year I compared it to other people throwing normal rescues around me, and I could not be happier with any other rescues. So having a Rogallo is a must-have. And I know that people are afraid because the packing is different, but anyway, most people don't pack their rescues themselves. They pay someone to do it. So anyway, it doesn't make a big difference. And in terms of packing, it's not that much more difficult. And in terms of opening, the opening rate of a Rogallo is great. It is as great as any other rescues. So I think a Rogallo is a must-have safety-wise. And related to that, and I already talked about it a bit before, it's really important that you know how to use your rescue. This is a very important skill, and I could not advise you more. You need to learn how to use your rescue as soon as you're a pilot. I know it's the second time I say it, but it's because it's very important.
Hold on. There's a good question about Rogallo. Do you recommend using it with quick out carabiners?
Not necessarily. I'm not a quick out fan personally, because I think they're a bit too annoying to use on a day-to-day basis, and they are really easy to create small mistakes because they are more complicated to use, and you don't really need to use a quick out if you know how to bring back your glider, and it's not really difficult to bring back and to neutralize your glider once you throw your rescue. Again, this is part of the know how to use your rescue advice. So I consider that it's more important to learn how to bring back your glider to you or to neutralize your glider than to buy quick out. On the other hand, if you feel more comfortable with quick out, I have nothing against them. I'm just not a huge fan of the quick outs.
Yeah, there's another good question from Hamid. Do you suggest practicing throwing your reserve over land?
I mean, it's not something that I would suggest if you have the possibility to do it above water. I know that not everyone has the possibility. If you have the possibility to do it above water, I think it's a great idea to do it. If you have a normal reserve, like a round or a square reserve, above land is not the best because the sink rate of a round reserve is not really nice and it's quite high. But if you have a Rogallo, you can safely try it above land if you have enough altitude to control your Rogallo and a really nice box with a lot of fields around you, because this you can steer, you can choose where you land, and your sink rate is not that big. But I still think that if you can do it above water, particularly for the first time, it's a better idea, in my opinion, because then you limit a bit the risks. But if you don't have the possibility to do it, and you have a Rogallo, trying above land is, in my opinion, not a big issue. But with a normal reserve, I would prefer above water.
Yeah, I think if there are obstacles, a normal reserve that cannot be steered is a no-go.
Yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult to plan the trajectory you're gonna take. So yeah, I think above water is definitely better with a normal reserve. But I know that not everyone has the possibility to have water. This is also an issue. All right.
Right.
So another part about being safe is to trust yourself, because as soon as you are starting to doubt yourself every step of the way, you are bound to make more mistakes. And this is something which is really, personal to everyone, because for some people, trusting themselves is really easy. For some people, it's not that easy. And you have to find a balance between not trusting yourself too much and trusting yourself enough. But still, I think there are some key aspects about trusting yourself, which are important. First of all, is, as we talked about before, is if you don't feel it, don't do it. So basically, if your gut says don't do it, don't do it. Most of the time, if you don't feel like doing it, probably doing it is a bad idea. So, and many times I felt that I should not do it and I didn't, and I was right. And the few times I did it anyway, I regretted it afterwards. So I would really say that if you feel that it's not something isn't right, it's better to not do it at all. We already talked about that briefly, so I won't spend too much time on that. I would say that be aware of the forecast, but open to the reality is quite important, which means that it's not because the forecast says it's like that, that it is like that. Because the forecast is just mathematical prediction, but it's not always the truth. And it's quite important to be open to the reality of things, which means that it's not because the forecast says there is only 10K of north wind that there will be only 10K of north wind. Sometimes it might be that there is 25K and it's a terrible day to fly, even if the forecast say it was good. And it's important, I think, to be open to the reality of the day and not to be too focused on the small arrows and the small numbers you saw on your computer screen before you go to fly, because otherwise you are bound to end up in terrible situations, I think. You have to be aware of the warnings your brain sends you. So sometimes most pilots, they just do not listen to any warnings. For example, when you get a red flag about the landing, like, okay, there is 3 gliders in the landing at the same time as me, and your brain is telling you to land somewhere else and to just land not on the landing but on another field. You just don't listen to it, and you go landing there anyway, and you end up with 3 other gliders. You are panicking and you crash in deep stall, or you crash in a tree or on a wall, because you didn't listen to your brain just telling you just do the thing safer and land somewhere else. This happens to me a lot. Like, if my brain is telling me don't do it, it's stupid, then I try to listen to it most of the time. It's similar to the gut feeling. If my brain is telling me it would be a lot better if you just do something safer and differently, I try to listen to it. It's a good warning. Another pretty important aspect to make a safer pilot is that driving down is never a bad decision. Being on the ground is always much better than regretting being in the air. So basically, if you are driving down from the launch because you didn't want to fly, it's totally okay. Even if it turns out to be very good to fly, at least you drove down and there you are here for another day of flying on the next days or on the next weeks. So I think it's really important to drive down when you don't feel like flying. It happens to me quite a lot in a year because I try to fly as much as possible. And so quite often I end up on takeoff when the conditions are terrible, and quite often I'm driving down. It's not because I go up that I'm expecting to fly. I'm just going up sometimes to see if it's flyable, and if it's not, I have no problem driving down. This is quite important. And this is something that you need to learn really early on, particularly because the more beginner you are, the more conditions are not suitable for you. So the more driving down you're gonna have to do if you are flying by yourself. And another pretty important aspect is that there is always another way, which means that if you are in a situation which is stressing you out, you usually kind of have this tunnel vision where you see only one way of doing things, while there is always another way. There is always another landing available. There is always another hour to wait on launch rather than take off straight away. There is always another path to the next terminal. There is always a safer path, and you need to be open to taking it. Usually your brain is showing you the possibilities, you just have to listen to them. I think that's quite important. And all of that comes from the fact that you need to trust your analysis, and you have to trust yourself and trust that if you think that what you are doing is right, probably it is right. And if you are not sure, then probably it is wrong. This is quite important. And we come to the last part of this presentation, which we're going to focus on motivation and ambition, because many pilots starting paragliding usually start highly motivated and highly ambitious, and sometimes it all gets a bit crushed because paragliding is not that easy a sport, and sometimes it's easy to bomb out before a cross-country flight, which crushes a lot of motivation and ambition. And sometimes it's easy to find out that acro flying is really kind of complicated, and it crushes motivation and ambition. And it's quite important to talk about it, even though there is no secret science and there is no right or wrong in motivation and ambition. I'm among the people that think that you can be highly motivated and ambitious and you are not unsafe, and you can be the opposite. So first of all, I think that being motivated does not make you unsafe. Most pilots, when they see you ultra motivated, they think that you're going to go crazy. And I think that being motivated doesn't make you unsafe, in my opinion. Nor being ambitious. Ambitious does not make you unsafe, but you have to be able to separate being motivated and ambitious with carelessness and insanity. Sometimes pilots are hiding behind the fact that they are motivated, and they are just careless and they are just crazy. So you have to be able to separate ambition and motivation with carelessness and insanity. So if you are really motivated, still try to keep a steady mind and try to think, am I doing the right thing? Am I afraid? Am I stressed? You know, all the things we talked about earlier, there are signs that show you if you are just being motivated and ambitious, or if you are just going completely insane and completely careless. And I think it is important to make the difference between both. You can be motivated, you can be ambitious, and it's important to get better, but still you have to be careful to not go too far in that direction. And this is related to, the last point, which is half a step forward is sometimes better than 5 steps backward. So basically, sometimes it's much better to move a bit slowly toward your goal, and to just take a small step toward your goal rather than take 5 steps backward because you scared yourself, you injured yourself, you crashed, or you don't want to ever fly again because something terrible happened to you. Sometimes it's just way easier to go step by step, go slowly toward your goal rather than just go full power and then take 5 steps backwards. I learned this the hard way, and I think a lot of other pilots learn this the hard way, and it's not a fun lesson to be taught and to learn, I think. Any remark, Till, on that?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I was among the lucky ones who didn't have to learn the hard way. But as I said before, it was definitely not my skills. It was my luck, especially in the beginning.
Yeah.
Like not knowing what you're doing, and not even knowing that you don't know anything. That was really luck that nothing happened to me. Now I know much more, and have become really cautious, and despite my experience, I'm often the one who is the first one to say, I'm not flying. I mean, I'm not losing anything. For you, it's something different. You are a pro pilot. You have to practice. If you don't practice, you're not going to be world champion or world class. I'm flying just for fun, and even if I want to do long cross country flights, but still I'm doing it for fun. And so if it doesn't feel okay, I'm not flying. And if I decide to land, I land.
Yeah.
I'm
And I
doing
think
it
it's
for fun.
quite important for pilots to remind themselves that they are most of the time flying for fun. We have, like, there are really few professional pilots out there. So almost 99% of the paragliding community is just flying for fun. So it's important to remember that it's just a hobby and not your livelihood, you know, your livelihood. So you need to fly for fun. If it's not fun anymore, it's not worth the risks.
Yeah. Yeah, there's one, let's say that's the last question. We have almost 1.5 hours. You thought it would be 45 minutes, so we've got almost twice as much, but that reflects that there's so much to tell and also the high interest. Natalia, she's asking, do you have an advice to know how much to push yourself or simply decide to drive down? No, it's a super personal aspect. How do you manage on yourself or on new students?
What I always try to do on myself first is that if I'm on launch and I don't feel it, so basically I have some limits that I fixed myself, wind wise or thermal wise or condition wise. Usually that I have some warnings, you know, that I say, okay, with this amount of wind, something is strange. I don't feel like it. Or I watch a lot of the other pilots flying, which give me a lot of informations. And these are like, as soon as I feel something isn't right, I usually drive down or I wait at launch. But if you're a beginner, it's really hard to know about those kind of things because you have really little experience. So what I usually say to pilots is that they have to listen to other pilots speaking and to other pilots, what other pilots are saying. And if other pilots are saying between themselves, wow, did you see how turbulent it was? Did you see it's a nasty day today? Or etc., etc. These are signs that if you're a beginner, probably it's not a good day for you. And maybe those pilots are also beginner and they were scared when they flew, but it doesn't matter if you miss just a day, even if it was flyable as a beginner, it's not a big thing. And you have to try to relate what pilots say with what you see. If you see that pilots are stuck in the wind and they are not going forward, or that their wings are moving a lot, and pilots around you tell you that it's a very good day and it's a really safe day, then it should be also warnings in your head. Okay, the pilots are stuck, there is a lot of wind, their wings are moving a lot, but everyone is telling me that it's good. Maybe I just should wait and see, or maybe I just should drive down. You know, you need to be able to check what the other pilots are doing and not to put 100% confidence in what they are saying. I would say that if they are saying it's terrible, you should consider this, because most pilots have too much ego to tell you that it's terrible. So when they do, it means it's really bad. And if they are telling you it's very good, check the wings, what they are doing in the sky and what's going on around you. And if something feels wrong, or if you feel a bit afraid, then just don't go and wait for another day. There are always better days for flying.
Yeah, I think that's a good ending. Ines just posted us that there are more questions, but I kindly ask you for your understanding that we don't want to do longer than 90 minutes. But what you can do is, like, this thing is being recorded, and you can do screenshots and just take all these sentences from Theo and actually think about it. Just thinking about it, I think, will also help you to improve your mental state concerning safe flying. Yeah, I would say, Theo, thanks a lot for your insights. That it was truly insights. It was very interesting for me too, and I'm pretty sure that everybody heard something interesting. If you like the general idea of the Nova Insights, in 2 weeks we will have Philip Medicus, our head of design, and he will talk about the development of a new wing. The whole process, especially what kind of software he's using for the design and for the simulations. So that's another thing. That's, yeah, you talked about how important also gear can be. So next week is gonna be about gear. If you don't want to miss any of the Nova Insights, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And I think that's it for today. Theo,
all right.
what's your next plans in the next week?
I'm gonna be training for the next days in Chamonix in France. Then I'm going to the Stubai Cup, hopefully to meet a lot of you guys and to spend time with Nova. So it would be 3rd to 5th of March, if I'm not mistaken. And then I'm gonna travel to the Canarias to train again.
Yeah, so Stubai Cup, that's a good place. We from Nova will be there. I will be there. You will be there. So everybody who could not get his questions answered, come and see us and ask Theo in person to get a 1-by-1.
I will be there.
Okay, so goodbye, everybody. Have a nice evening.
Bye-bye.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
watching the Nova Insights. Thanks, Theo.
Bye.